Relax to these Southwest Lost Gold stories. Leave a like or comment. For more Southwest stories, hit the subscribe button. Please enjoy. Welcome to the fascinating stories and legends of Southwest Desert Lost Gold. This story begins over a century ago, somewhere along the dusty trail that winds from the town of Shakespeare to the ominously named Skeleton Canyon. There, if local legend is to be believed, lies a shallow, abandoned mining shaft filled with an incredible fortune. Over $1 million worth of stolen gold and silver bars, sacks of ancient Spanish coins, and priceless jewels looted from a Mexican cathedral. This immense treasure was said to be the ill-gotten plunder of a notorious gang of bandits led by the infamous outlaw Jim Hughes. He and his crew, consisting of the deadly gunslingers Zwing Hunt, Doc Neal, and Red Curly, were already wanted for their suspected involvement in the bloody Lincoln County War, a conflict made famous by the exploits of Billy the Kid. But their audacious raid on Monterey would be their most daring crime yet. Joining forces with the vicious Estrada gang, Hughes and his men launched their brazen scheme. In the dark of night, they crept into a government corral and made off with 24 mules, the first step in their meticulously planned heist. Crossing the border into Mexico, the bandits descended upon the city of Monterey. They struck first at the local mint and smelter, cleaning out the vaults and making off with a fortune in freshly minted gold and silver bars. Next, they turned their attention to the majestic cathedral that loomed over the town square. Caring nothing for the sanctity of the church, they ransacked the building, snatching jewel-encrusted chalices, gold candlesticks, and gem-studded crucifixes. Anything small enough to carry and valuable enough to be worth the risk. The bandits rode hard for the border under the cover of darkness. By the time the shocked citizens of Monterey realized the extent of the pillaging, Hughes and his gang were already back on U.S. soil, their massive haul estimated to be worth a staggering $800,000, a colossal sum in those days. But there was dissension in the ranks of the thieves. Bad blood quickly developed between the Mexican Estrada gang members and the American outlaws. Mistrust and greed boiled over into violence, and a vicious gunfight erupted. When the dust settled and the echoes of the shots faded, the ground was littered with the bullet-riddled bodies of the Estrada men. Hughes and his remaining crew had prevailed, but not without cost. Zwing Hunt had been badly wounded in the exchange. Fearing the law would soon be on their tail, the bandits knew they needed to stash their treasure quickly. They chose a remote spot close to Skeleton Canyon, New Mexico, to serve as a temporary hiding place for their plundered riches. Hunt, still nursing his festering wound, was tasked with standing guard over the buried loot while the others continued their spree of raids and robberies across the territories. Hughes led his men on a months-long tear of pillaging, striking at stagecoaches, mining camps, and anyone else unfortunate enough to cross their path. But their vicious streak of marauding came to a brutal end with the ruthless murder of a local farmer and his young son. After callously gunning down the innocent pair, the gang stole their wagon and oxen, intending to use them to finally transport their immense treasure trove. Returning to Skeleton Canyon, they found Hunt recovered from his grievous injury and eager to be on the move. The treasure, now believed to be worth over $1 million, was loaded into the stolen wagon. Gold and silver bars were stacked like cordwood. Sacks of ancient coins and priceless jewels pilfered from the cathedral were nestled among the bars. But fate, it seemed, had other plans for the murderous thieves. After an estimated 40 to 50 miles of hard travel over sharp, cutting rocks, the unshod oxen began to falter, their hooves cracked and bleeding, unable to continue hauling the monumental weight of the treasure. Progress ground to a halt. The bandits knew they were in a precarious position. The law would be hunting them. They couldn't risk being caught with the incriminating loot. Thinking quickly, Hughes and his men labored through the night carrying load after load of riches up a nearby hillside. There, they found an abandoned mining shaft, likely dug by some luckless prospector. The men dumped the bullion and coins down the dark hole. Sacks containing the priceless church artifacts and jewelry were tossed in last. Grabbing shovels, the bandits then scattered the rock pile that had accumulated around the mine, filling the opening until it was indistinguishable from the surrounding landscape. Their dark work complete, they turned the oxen free to fend for themselves in the desert, burned the wagon to ashes to hide the evidence, and rode on toward Silver City, their saddlebags jingling with the few coins and baubles they'd held back for spending money. In Silver City, flush with cash, the gang celebrated their success with a prolonged drunken spree. They caroused in the saloons, spending lavishly and drinking heavily. It was a fateful mistake. Drunk on whiskey and their own perceived invincibility, the outlaws grew careless. An argument broke out over a card game. Guns were drawn. And when the smoke cleared, a young man lay dead on the barroom floor, an innocent victim of Hughes and his trigger-happy comrades. The citizens of Silver City, long weary of the depredations of outlaw scum, seized upon this last outrage as a chance for retribution. A posse was hastily formed, and the bandits were forced to flee for their lives into the hills. Enraged and determined not to let the killers escape, the posse tracked the gang relentlessly. One by one, the exhausted outlaws were run to ground. A crack shot felled Doc Neal from his saddle, killing him instantly. Hunt, still weakened from his previous injury, was captured alive and dragged back to the town of Tombstone to face justice. But fate granted him a cruel reprieve when he managed a desperate escape, only to be killed and scalped a few weeks later by Apache warriors. Hughes and Red Curly, the last of the gang, made it to the tiny hamlet of Shakespeare. But their luck had finally run out. The posse caught up with them there, and in a brief but furious gunfight, the two outlaws were captured. The people of Shakespeare knew these men and their crimes all too well, and they had no intention of turning the villains over to the uncertain wheels of justice. Hughes and Curly were roughly hauled into the dining room of the Pioneer House, a sturdy beam chosen to serve as an impromptu gallows. As the grim-faced citizens watched, nooses were lowered over the bandits' heads and tightened around their necks. A desperate Curly made one last attempt to bargain for his life. He offered to lead the townsfolk back to the place where the treasure was buried, promising them unimaginable wealth, if only they would spare him the hangman's noose. But the angry mob would have none of it. They had seen too many innocents brutalized at the hands of men like Curly. With a nod from the impromptu executioners, the stools were kicked away, and Hughes and Curly dropped to their much-deserved deaths. And with the death of the last of the thieves, the secret of the Monterey loot's location died with them. Countless treasure hunters and prospectors have combed the hills around Skeleton Canyon in the decades since, seeking that lost mine shaft filled with a fortune in stolen gold and jewels. They've explored as far afield as El Muerto Springs and Shakespeare, scouring the desert for any sign of the missing loot. But as the years turned to decades, and decades to over a century, the hidden shaft's location has remained a mystery. If it does indeed still exist, it likely lies concealed beneath rockfall and desert vegetation, a secret hoard of history and myth awaiting some lucky wanderer to stumble upon it and become fabulously wealthy overnight. Will the Monterey loot ever be found? Perhaps. The desert is vast, and men's dreams of sudden riches die hard. And somewhere out there under the baking New Mexico sun, resting in eternal silence beneath the dust and creosote, there may yet lie the glinting treasure of doomed outlaws. We hope you've enjoyed this journey into a long-buried past of lost bandit gold. Lost treasures of untold riches lie shrouded behind the veil of America's mythic Southwest. From abandoned bandit loot to the fantastical El Dorado itself, few tales entice adventurous souls quite like that of an undiscovered bonanza. And deep within Arizona's rugged Verde River country rests one legendary mine that continues to captivate those seeking fortune and glory. In the remote and rugged Arizona high country lies the site of a legendary lost Apache gold mine. Though its exact location remains a mystery, the story of this rich vein of gold quartz endures as an intriguing tale of the old American Southwest. This fabled lode was reported by even one of the most famous Apache leaders, the great Geronimo himself. As he took his final breath in 1909, so too did the secret location of an extraordinarily rich vein of gold quartz. First discovered by his forefathers centuries ago, the mine was taken from native hands by Spanish conquistadors bent on expanding their New World plunder. En route to Zuni pueblos in New Mexico, they came upon the strange Apache's marvelous golden quarry and turned their army into one of miners. Attracted by the pure quality of the gold ore, 6 of the Spanish troops decided to stay behind and take over the mine workings. Near a spring emerging from under a large boulder at the base of a soaring cliff, the men constructed facilities like a stone house, rock wall, smelting furnace, and gold processing equipment to work the site in the narrow canyon. The Apaches deeply resented the uninvited Spaniards' presence on their traditional lands. They frequently assaulted the mine by direct raids or rolling massive boulders down from the towering canyon walls onto the operations below. Heavily armed, the Spanish knew leaving behind such profitable gold would be madness. As they burrowed deeper, the quartz quality improved to nearly 50% pure gold. After many months and accumulating substantial smelted gold, the soldiers opted to transport their haul back to Mexico to bring reinforcements for safer mining. But while hastily fleeing, they failed to properly secure the canyon's entrance. Descending Apache warriors launched a surprise attack, killing over half the men. The 2 surviving Spaniards buried the gold bars back inside the tunnels and managed to escape on horseback. They eventually returned to Mexico, but were unable to ever retrieve their buried treasure or rediscover the secluded mine. However, the pair left behind a crude map and mining records that may still hold clues to finding this legendary bonanza. In his later years, the Apache warrior Geronimo allegedly used knowledge of the mine's whereabouts in bargaining for his release from American captivity, though he refused to reveal the exact site. Today, some still believe it could lie near Sycamore Canyon, based on Mexican versions of the tale that describe nearby terrain features. Although the troves of Spanish bullion remain more fable than fact, for spirited explorers, the allure of this lost mine endures. In this episode, we'll be exploring the tantalizing tale of the lost Breyfogle Mine. The story begins in the early spring of 1863 in southern Nevada. 3 prospectors by the names of Breyfogle, O'Banion, and McLeod stopped to rest and replenish their supplies at the Las Vegas Ranch, an oasis of cool springs shaded by towering cottonwood trees. After a few days of recuperation, the trio set off again, this time heading south across the scorching desert sands. Little did they know, only one of them would ever return. Several weeks passed before Breyfogle stumbled back into the Las Vegas Ranch, alone and in dire straits. He was severely dehydrated and suffering from a serious head wound. His skull had been fractured. Clutched tightly in his hands was a red bandana, heavy with the weight of several pounds of rich gold ore. Once his injury had been tended to, and he had been given food and water, Breyfogle recounted an astonishing story. He said that 3 days after leaving the ranch, the The prospectors had made camp at a small spring situated high on a mountainside at the end of a narrow box canyon. One day they were approached by 3 Paiute Native Americans who told them of an incredibly rich vein of gold located about 3 miles from their camp. Eager to investigate, Breyfogle accompanied the Paiutes to see this mine for himself and procure some ore samples. However, during the trek back to camp, one of the Paiutes walking behind Breyfogle struck him on the head with a tomahawk, leaving him for dead. Miraculously, Breyfogle regained consciousness during the night. In a daze, he made his way back to the camp, only to find a scene of horror awaiting him. His 2 partners lay murdered, their meager provisions and firearms stolen. Badly injured and now alone, Breyfogle somehow managed to navigate his way back across the unforgiving desert to the Vegas ranch, a journey that took him 3 arduous days. After taking time to recover from his ordeal, Breyfogle set out once again, this time heading towards Austin, Nevada. There, he organized several search parties to try to relocate the fateful spring and the purported outcropping of rose-colored quartz that promised untold riches. However, the severe head trauma Breyfogle had suffered seemed to have impaired his memory and sense of direction. Try as he might, he was never able to find any place resembling the location shown him by the Paiutes. The legendary Breyfogle Mine seemed lost for good. Accounts of this story vary, but most point to the McCullough Mountains just north of present-day Crescent, Nevada, as the most likely site of the lost mine. Many years later, an author named John Mitchell went to the ranch. To his amazement, Mrs. Stewart, the proprietor, presented him with 2 small pieces of the very same gold ore that Breyfogle had left with her all those decades ago. Intrigued, he set out to explore the McCullough Range, focusing his search on the western slopes. High up on the mountainside, he came across what appeared to be an abandoned camp surrounding a small spring. Scattered about were the rusted remains of old cooking utensils, evidencing the site's former occupation. But what he found next sent a thrill of excitement through him. There, above the remnants of a stone fireplace, was a crevice in the rock face, and nestled within that weathered nook was a cache of ore, about 10 pounds total, that perfectly matched the samples Breyfogle had entrusted to Mrs. Stewart. Leading away from the spring and off toward the northeast was the faint trace of an old trail. The path was narrow and faded, but it clearly bore the marks of moccasined feet that had once trod its length. Could this be the very route Breyfogle had traveled with the Paiute guides, the trail that led to the legendary lost mine? He had the ore samples recovered from the old camp tested, and the results were staggering. The assay showed a gold concentration equivalent to $6,780 per ton, an almost unimaginable richness. If the lost vein could be found, it would undoubtedly be one of the greatest strikes in the history of the Old West. Unfortunately, to this day, no one has been able to rediscover the source of Breyfogle's gold. The Breyfogle Ledge, as it came to be known, remains lost somewhere in the rugged hills and canyons of southern Nevada. But despite the many fruitless searches and fading hopes, there are still those who believe. Seasoned prospectors who have spent their lives chasing the dream of striking it rich in the unforgiving Southwest hold fast to the conviction that the old Breyfogle Mine is out there somewhere, waiting to be found. The legend of the Breyfogle Mine is a testament to the enduring spirit of the Old West, a time and place where fortunes could be made or lost in the blink of an eye, where danger and hardship were the constant companions of those daring enough to chase their dreams across the uncharted frontier. So the next time you find yourself in southern Nevada, take a moment to gaze out across those stark and beautiful desert lands. Let your imagination drift back to a time when brave men ventured into the unknown, following the siren song of gold. And who knows? Maybe, just maybe, you'll be the one to finally unravel the mystery of the lost Breyfogle Mine. Today we unravel the intriguing tale of a hidden cave nestled in the heart of Death Valley, a cave that may hold the key to one of the most substantial deposits of placer gold ever unearthed on the American continent. Our story begins in the mid-1800s, a time when the California gold rush was at its zenith. During this era, 500 brave immigrants set out from southern Utah, their sights set on the promising gold fields of California. Little did they know that their arduous journey would take them right over, and in some tragic cases, to their final resting place within sight of what might have been the legendary El Dorado of the Great Southwest. The tale unfolds with two Paiute Indian brothers, who found themselves searching for their wayward horses along the western edge of a dry lake in Death Valley. As they scanned the horizon, their eyes fell upon what seemed to be the entrance to an abandoned tunnel in the distance. Curiosity piqued, they approached the peculiar sight, only to discover that it was, in fact, the entrance to a cave. The brothers, seeking respite from the unrelenting heat of the summer sun, ventured into the cave. To their surprise, a refreshing breeze emanated from the depths of the cavern, carrying with it the distant sound of running water. Intrigued, they proceeded to remove the pieces of limestone that had fallen from the roof, partially obstructing the entrance. As they made their way along the narrow tunnel, they reached a point where the floor began to slope downward, and the walls expanded, revealing a vast, dome-shaped cavern with a mysterious dark pool at its base. The water in the pool boiled up from its center, creating mesmerizing waves that crashed against the rocky shore and shattered into a delicate spray. The shore of the subterranean lake resembled a grand amphitheater, with step-like terraces cascading down to the water's edge. The sheer force of the water churned up heavy black sand from the depths, depositing it on the terraces surrounding the lake. Some of the sand would trickle back into the pool, only to be brought up to the surface once more in an endless cycle. One of the Paiute brothers, overcome by curiosity, scooped up a handful of the black sand and carried it out into the sunlight. To his astonishment, the sand glittered with small nuggets and flakes of gold, each one polished smooth by the relentless churning of the pool. As the brothers watched in awe, the water began to recede, exposing thousands of tons of the gold-enriched sand on the terraces. Realizing the potential value of their discovery, they made a pact to keep the cave's existence a secret. The following day, they returned, equipped with a wagon and several sacks to collect the precious sand. Venturing further into the cave, guided only by the flickering light of a primitive torch, the brothers encountered a scene that defied belief. From the dome-shaped roof hung long, exquisitely colored crystals, reminiscent of great icicles. Stalagmites towered above them, their surfaces encrusted with gems that scintillated like diamonds in the torchlight. It was as if they had stumbled upon a magical castle plucked straight from the pages of the Arabian Nights, with an untold fortune in gold strewn across the floor and hidden within the dark pool. Tragically, the tale takes a sorrowful turn when one of the brothers, overcome by a sense of adventure, attempted to swim to a small rocky island near the center of the pool. As he reached the midpoint of his swim, the bottom of the pool suddenly gave way, and the water rushed into a subterranean outlet with a deafening roar, dragging the unfortunate Paiute down with it. His brother, left behind on the shore, maintained a vigil for several days, hoping against hope for his siblings' return. However, he never saw his brother again. Due to the tribal taboo against returning to a place where a member had met their death, the surviving brother never returned to the golden cavern beneath the burning sands. While the precise location of this extraordinary cave remains shrouded in mystery, the haunting story of the Paiute brothers and the hidden gold of Death Valley continues to ignite the imagination of treasure hunters and adventurers alike. The allure of untold riches, secreted away in the unforgiving landscape of the American Southwest, has inspired countless expeditions and fueled the dreams of those who dare to seek out the elusive El Dorado. On this episode of Southwest Desert, we'll be diving into the fabled tales surrounding the enigmatic character known as Death Valley Scotty. Born Walter Edward Scott in 1872, Scotty earned his larger-than-life reputation through a series of audacious exploits and incredible stories of hidden gold in the unforgiving landscape of Death Valley. Our story begins in the bustling mining town of Winnemucca, Nevada, in the year 1910. The national mine was in its heyday, producing staggering riches and fueling the dreams of hopeful prospectors from far and wide. Amidst this electric atmosphere walked an unassuming figure, a Native American known simply as Indian Ike. With pockets brimming with glittering specimens of white honeycomb quartz laced with gold, Ike became the talk of the town. Onlookers watched in amazement as Ike casually sold off chunks of rock, some containing more gold than stone, for mere pittances. 2-pound samples that could be hammered into fine jewelry went for just $2.50 to $5. It seemed the humble Native American had no inkling of the true value of his wares. After each sale, Ike would gather up his family, his wife Lizzie, young daughter, and 2 small sons, and make his way to Turin Brown's general store. There, perched on the curb, the happy clan would feast on candy, cookies, and fresh fruit, a picture of contentment amidst the rough-hewn camp. Ike always set aside ample provisions to last until his next visit to town. Curious locals soon traced Ike's path back to his small allotment in nearby Humboldt Canyon, nestled beyond the ghost town ruins of Humboldt City. To reach his homestead, Ike journeyed past the decaying remains of a cabin, proudly marked as once housing the famous writer Mark Twain himself. Just over the mountain lay Unionville, where Twain once famously mistook fool's gold for the real thing, an incident humorously recounted in his book Roughing It. Old-timers still recall with pride how Twain had written to the Virginia City Enterprise proclaiming this the richest place on God's footstool. Against this colorful backdrop, the scramble to uncover the source of Ike's gold reached a fever pitch. Seasoned prospectors peppered the reticent Native American with questions, while the boldest attempted to shadow him back to his secret mine. But the wily Ike always managed to throw them off the scent, leading his pursuers on fruitless detours. Enter Death Valley Scotty, already a living legend in his own right. Someone hit upon the idea of luring Scotty out from his desert sanctuary to take up the search. If anyone can sniff out Ike's gold, it'll be Scotty, the townsfolk declared with confidence. That man can smell the precious metal from a mile away. For weeks, Scotty scoured Humboldt Canyon and the surrounding hills, his relentless quest becoming the talk of Winnemucca. Then one fateful day, the man himself stepped off the train, instantly recognizable by his trademark slouch hat, blue flannel shirt, and ever-present overcoat, rumored to remain on his back even in sleep. Slung over his shoulder was a bulging flour sack, clinking with the promise of untold riches. As Scotty strode towards town, a growing crowd of excited onlookers fell in step behind him, eager for a glimpse of his latest haul. "Open her up, Scotty," they clamored. "Give us a peek." But the taciturn prospector simply smiled and continued on, letting their speculations hang heavy in the air. Turning into the first saloon, Scotty hoisted his sack onto the bar. "Drinks all around, boys. Barkeep, take your pay straight from the sack." As the bartender gingerly untied the string and peered inside, a strangled yelp escaped his throat. He hastily retied the bag, stammering out an offer of free drinks, unable to form a coherent sentence. The clamor of the curious crowd only intensified. On down the street Scotty meandered, his expanding entourage in tow, stopping at each saloon to repeat the ritual. Each time the bartender's face would register shock before drinks were wordlessly placed on the house. Emboldened by liquid courage, Copperstain Edwards elbowed his way to the front, boasting, "I'm going to see what's in that sack." Scotty's vice-like grip on his wrist quickly put an end to that ill-conceived plan. As the day wore on and whiskeys flowed, Copperstain and his comrade Hobe Luther hatched a scheme. "A few more belts and we'll have old Scotty singing like a canary about that gold." Hobe slurred conspiratorially, but the desert fox was not so easily cornered. "Say, Scotty," ventured hotel owner Phil Bloom, "word is you bought yourself a big truck. What do you need that for way out in Death Valley?" "Haul hay for the mules," came the deadpan reply. "And what are the mules for?" "To haul gas for the truck." Guffaws erupted from the peanut gallery as Scotty, eyes twinkling, took another swig. At the last watering hole, with Hobe and Copperstain snoring under a table in the rear, a well-lubricated Scotty finally upended his sack across the bar. Mouths gaped in disbelief as common rocks clattered out, not a glint of gold to be seen. There, coiled in the center, lay one very dead rattlesnake, forked tongue protruding in seeming mockery. Now, listeners, you may think this episode ended in disappointment, but there's more to it than meets the eye. You see, for years afterward, federal revenue agents hounded Scotty, convinced he'd catched away a king's ransom from a discovery made decades prior. 30 years earlier, they claimed, he'd hit upon an astonishingly rich vein and had been living off his prudently stashed wealth ever since, untouchable by the income taxes that came into law well after his strike. Scotty, for his part, was happy to fuel these rumors while steadfastly refusing to confirm or deny them. "Let the revenuers keep chasing their tails," he'd say with a twinkle in his eye. If he had a fortune tucked away out there in the shimmering dunes and desolate canyons, only he and the unforgiving desert would ever know. So, what are we to make of Death Valley Scotty and his tall tales? Perhaps there truly is a long-lost motherlode still waiting to be stumbled upon by some lucky prospector. Or maybe the real treasure was simply the joy Scotty took in keeping everyone guessing, maintaining his air of mystery to the very end. In a landscape as harsh and unforgiving as Death Valley, a man's myth is his legacy. In the wild and untamed Arizona desert, a long-lost secret lies hidden, waiting to be uncovered. Join us as we delve into the captivating tale of the Lost Pick Mine, where fortune and misfortune intertwine in a gripping story of adventure, gold, and tragedy. In 1871, rumors swirled around the frontier town of Phoenix about an old Apache Native American who frequently visited the store at Fort McDowell, bartering rich chunks of gold ore for supplies. The Apache, known to reside in the Bronco Canyon country, about 50 miles north of Phoenix and 25 miles northwest of the fort, had been engaging in this practice for about a year when two seasoned prospectors, Brown and Davis, took notice. One day, as the old Apache entered the store with his pockets laden with the rich ore, matted together with coarse wires and nuggets of gold, Brown and Davis were astounded by the quality of the rock. They had never seen anything like it in all their years of prospecting. Intrigued, the two men decided to follow the Apache as he left the store and headed out across the desert. After traveling about 10 miles, the Apache descended into Coon Creek Canyon and followed it up to its junction with the East Fork of Bronco Canyon. It was there that Brown and Davis lost the trail. Undeterred, they returned to the fort, purchased supplies to last them several weeks, and set out once more with their burros, determined to uncover the source of the rich gold ore. One night, while camped at a small spring on the South Fork of the canyon, Brown and Davis made a startling discovery. In a patch of manzanita brush on the west side of the canyon, they stumbled upon an 18-inch quartz vein, incredibly rich in free gold, similar to that they had seen in the hands of the Apache. The vein showed clear signs of having been worked, with little piles of ore scattered along its length and under the nearby Palo Verde trees. Pottery shards strewn about indicated that the vein had been worked by Native American squaws. Excited by their find, Brown and Davis constructed a crude arasta near their camp to grind the rich ore. After processing 25 sacks of quartz, the partners estimated they had amassed between $70,000 and $80,000 in gold, with pannings indicating that the ore would assay around $80,000 per ton. They carefully stored the amalgam, rolled into balls, in a hole under a large rock near the arasta on the east bank of the creek. With their newfound wealth, Brown and Davis decided to return to their old home in San Francisco, rest for a few months, and then purchase machinery to work their mine. However, tragedy struck as they were preparing to break camp. A small party of Apache warriors emerged from the rocks near the arasta and opened fire. Davis, the younger of the two prospectors, was killed instantly by a bullet to the head. Brown managed to grab his rifle and take cover behind a large boulder, killing 3 of the attacking Apaches and wounding a 4th before the others fled into the rocky canyon. Brown escaped into the manzanita thicket with only his rifle and the clothes on his back. Years later, a piece of rich ore he had carried in his pocket was assayed in San Francisco and found to contain an astonishing $84,000 per ton in gold. Brown kept the secret of the lost mine, waiting for the right time to return to the wild Native American country. As the years passed and the Indians were pacified and placed on reservations, the 80-year-old prospector decided to return to the scene of the strike. However, while gathering supplies in Phoenix, Brown fell ill and was hospitalized. On his deathbed, he finally revealed the story of the rich strike and the tragic confrontation with the Apaches. He spoke of the balls of amalgam buried in a shallow hole between a large boulder and a stratum of white volcanic ash that outcrops along the foot of the mountains on the east side of the little valley, hoping that they remained undiscovered by the Apaches. Some years later, a Mexican goat herder stumbled upon the site of an old mining camp in the area, spotting a rusty pick stuck in a crevice in a small quartz vein. This discovery seemed to corroborate Brown's dying statement about his partner's pick being left in the quartz when he was killed by the Native Americans. However, the Mexican disappeared before the story of the pick could reach those who knew about the lost gold mine. To this day, it is said that a circle of rocks indicating the location of an ancient arasta can be found in the region, but the pick and the cache of gold remain lost, waiting to be rediscovered by some fortunate adventurer. The Lost Pick Mine continues to capture the imagination of those who hear its tale, a testament to the enduring allure of hidden treasures and the untamed wilderness of the Arizona desert. Welcome, fellow prospectors, to a new edition of the Southwest Desert Podcast. I am your host, Alan. In this revealing episode, we'll be venturing into the rugged San Gabriel Mountains, just a stone's throw from Los Angeles, to uncover the riveting tales and enduring mysteries around the gold buried deep in San Gabriel Canyon. Now, you might know this area for its great fishing, camping, and hiking, and with gorgeous pine forests and bubbling trout streams, it certainly doesn't disappoint on the outdoor front. But beyond the scenic beauty lies a hidden history, dating back centuries of people obsessed with the golden treasures locked within these canyon walls. It wasn't until the mid-1800s, though, when the California gold rush was in full swing, that prospectors arrived in droves seeking instant wealth. Within a few short years, a massive mining town named Eldoradoville sprang up, packed with about 2,000 people. Life in Eldoradoville was a wild mix of rowdy saloons, pop-up shops, diverse settlers from all walks of life, and non-stop work in the mines. But danger lurked around every corner, from deadly floods to violent squabbles over claims. From this period, tales of gold discoveries abound. And yet, the biggest treasure of all remains undiscovered. Legend tells of a secret mother lode, a massive vein of incredibly rich gold hidden somewhere in the canyon walls. This has lured generations of prospectors who continue the hunt to this day. In this intriguing episode, we'll dig into the specifics around the lost mines, mysterious maps, and colorful characters connected to San Gabriel Canyon's buried treasures. All right, let's dive right into the murky history and legend around San Gabriel Canyon's lost gold. Now, pinning down exactly when gold was first discovered here is tricky, but there are some tantalizing clues. The story begins with the Shoshone, who were the first inhabitants of this canyon. In their riverside village of Asuksagna, which later became part of Azusa, they crafted tools, jewelry, and art from the gold found here. Arrowheads, mortars, and other artifacts proved they had settlements near the canyon mouth. We can still see signs of the Shoshone today in ancient artifacts and mysterious rock carvings scattered throughout the canyon. Intriguingly, when the Shoshone first visited the San Gabriel mission, they brought gold trinkets with them. This suggests they knew of the precious metal in the local canyons. Even more intriguing are the persistent rumors of Spanish expeditions setting out to explore the San Gabriel Canyon in the 1770s, around the time the mission was built. Though unproven, it hints at very early gold discoveries that predate the gold rush era. But we have solid evidence that full-scale mining was underway in the canyon by 1855. And get this, in just 15 years, an estimated $12 million in gold was pulled out. Hard to fathom how much lies buried beyond reach. To house the hordes who flocked here, a ramshackle town arose along the east fork of the San Gabriel River. Christened Eldoradoville, it was a typical mining boom town, rowdy, crudely built, but absolutely bursting with optimistic fortune seekers. At its peak, Eldoradoville had 1,600 to 2,000 residents. Miners came from all backgrounds: American settlers, Mexicans, Chinese immigrants, and native Shoshone. Life was tough, but the promise of riches trumped all. They tunneled relentlessly, blasted away at rock walls, and washed countless pans along the riverbanks. But one fateful winter day, disaster struck. On January 18, 1862, a massive flood ravaged the canyon. It decimated Eldoradoville, tossing boulders and demolishing everything in its path. Though many rebuilt and returned to mining, this flood marked the beginning of the end. Now, Eldoradoville itself may be gone without a trace, but signs of those lucrative mining efforts remain. Extensive tunnels, scarred cliffs, and excavated ridges testify to just how thoroughly they combed these canyon walls. Some tunnels cut deep, stretching hundreds of feet into the earth. Others are partially collapsed, barred by rockfalls. While fascinating to see, do not enter these unstable shafts. No amount of lost gold is worth that risk. Instead, retrace the footsteps of those fortune-seeking 49ers along the trails and ravines where the town once stood. Imagine the chaos of Eldoradoville during its heyday, fueled by gold fever. All right, now for the fun part, the lost mines and buried treasures. Here are some of the tales and legends around San Gabriel Canyon's secret riches. First is the story of Old Man Hardy, passed down directly from the daughter of a 19th-century canyon rancher. Hardy was an English miner who supposedly located an insanely rich lode of gold-bearing green slate, but its location died with him. Here's how the story goes. Once a year, Hardy would return to mine this hidden lode, which the family called the Green Slate Ledge. He'd take the rancher's young son as a guide, but never let him come close to the source. After mining for 2 weeks, he'd return with enough gold to live off for a year. On his last trip, Hardy was murdered in his cabin, taking the secret location to his grave. Somewhere out there beneath the pines and granite cliffs could sit a gold-laden green slate deposit just waiting to be rediscovered. Then there's the tale of Luciano, a local Shoshone man not known for hard work. Yet somehow, he never lacked cash. Prospectors noticed his odd habit of disappearing up canyon just when his supply of tobacco and whiskey ran low. 2 or 3 days later, he'd return from the direction of Iron Mountain with ample gold to fund his sloth for months. Try as they might, no one could trace Luciano to the source. The sly old codger died without revealing his personal mother lode. And Luciano wasn't alone in his uncanny ability to routinely uncover riches. Whispers tell of other native people frequently turning up gold from places unknown to the white settlers. Could it be ancestral knowledge of rich lodes passed down within the tribes? Some even believe the Shoshone know the true location of the legendary mother lode that birthed all of San Gabriel Canyon's gold. But for now, it remains their fiercely guarded secret. All right, last tale of lost fortunes, a puzzling map and ominous warning. In the late 1800s, an apprehensive miner handed a crudely drawn map to a young boy from El Doradoville. It marked a remote canyon mine of untold riches, but the miner refused to go himself. Why? Because for years he'd had a recurring nightmare of being trapped and killed in a mine collapse if he dug any deeper into that hillside. So he entrusted the map to the boy, urging him to wait until he was older and gather help to excavate the site. But before the boy came of age, the map was lost. And ever since, the forbidden mine of the old man's dreams has haunted modern prospectors. Somewhere it remains concealed, awaiting the day its staggering wealth gets unearthed. Now, whether these stories ring true or not, the pull of undiscovered gold persists. On any given weekend, you'll find packs of prospectors scouring the canyon, panning along creek beds and examining ridges for signs of glittering quartz. The dream lives on, and who knows, maybe the next amateur gold hunter will uncover a huge golden nugget or find a trace of that elusive mother lode. It could still be out there waiting, so keep those eyes peeled. And with those tantalizing possibilities, our epic Lost Gold podcast draws to a close. A huge thanks for joining me on this wild ride through San Gabriel Canyon's riveting history and enduring mysteries. Now, before you grab your trusty pan and compass to start sleuthing, let me remind you to be smart and safe out there. Trails wash out, tunnels collapse, and snakes abound, so exercise caution during your canyon adventures. If you're aiming to pan for gold yourself, get tips from the experts first. Places like the Williams Camp restaurant rent equipment and give pointers to novice prospectors. However you choose to chase the golden legends, I hope this podcast stirs your sense of adventure. Even without bags of gold nuggets, time spent outdoors forging new trails awakens our spirits. The lost fortunes of San Gabriel Canyon have claimed lives, fueled myths, and lured endless optimists for over a century. Their enduring allure pays testament to just how deeply that spark of discovery lives within us all. So, fellow prospectors, here's to new horizons and treasures waiting to be found. This is Alan signing off. Come back next time as we uncover the secrets hidden within our world's wild places and the compelling stories behind them. Thank you for joining your desert frontiersman Alan on this journey through these lost gold stories of the Southwest. Please leave a like or comment. Hit the subscribe button for more desert romps. Happy trails!